Well, here we're looking at Module 4, which I've called Ways of Dying, which could have been more accurately called depictions of dying in film. And that's what it is. But I'll tell you my thinking in putting this module together and why I chose to do it through films and why I chose the scenes that I did. One of the things I hope that came clear, if we look, for instance, at the way that Module 2 is labeled theories of death. If we think about death itself, and we're thinking about death, which is not easy to do, and I don't just mean psychologically or emotionally, but just conceptually, it's hard. When we talk about death itself, we are talking about theories of death because death is, of course, if we think about, especially about an afterlife, or if we even think about death in an Epicurean sense, we're doing metaphysics. That is, we're trying to understand something that is not directly experienceable, at least in our current form, I suppose. If you're a Platonist or a Christian, there will be experiences after death, but the nature of those experiences is not something that we can really understand from, let's say, this side of death. So anything we say about those experiences or anything we say about death itself will be trying to understand something that is beyond the capacity of our experience, something that is metaphysical. I'm not saying we can't do it. We certainly do it. We have done it. Philosophers do it. We've done it in this course. But dying is certainly something that we can imagine because it's something that we will experience, at least in some way. That is, the approach to death, our approach to death within our lives, is not metaphysical. It's an extraordinary experience, no doubt, but it is an experience, and it's something that we can live through. Contrast it, say, with the Epicurean view of death as something that is logically impossible to live through. There's nothing to live through. But dying, on any account, on any theory of death, dying is something that we can go through, something we can experience. And I believe that the way that we imagine ourselves going through it and the way that we imagine others going through it, and the experience, we can actually experience others going through it before we go through it ourselves, is quite important and indicative of our views, not only of what death is, but our views of the meaning of life. That is, this very crucial human experience of dying is crucial because it just is reflective and of so many of our other views. That is, how we characterize the dying process is influenced or maybe even determined by what we think of the significance of death itself and what we view life to be about. And how the human being, of course, faces when you are faced with death in the most immediate way, when you know that you're dying. You can no longer live in denial of it or evasion of it or just deciding not to think about it. How do you deal with it? Well, I think that all of those reasons are good reasons to look at these death scenes from various films. I'll try to restrain myself in over-interpreting them, saying, or just meaning not over-interpreting them, because interpretation is good. Don't worry about over-interpreting something in a philosophy class. That's what you're asked to do. But I'll try to restrain myself from expressing my personal opinions about these three, because one thing I really want you to do is to decide for yourself which one of these views of dying, and of course they are theatrical, they're dramatic, they're not meant to be exhaustive of all views of death, nor are they particularly realistic, although there's something real in all of them, I think. But the idea is that you choose the one that you think, for whatever reason, expresses the truth about dying. uh, in the closest way to your own view. It'll be clear that I've chosen them for contrast, especially the first and the second. That is the death scene from the Canadian film The Barbarian Invasions and the death scene from the American film Magnolia. They are two very different depictions of the end of a man's life. And it's clear that the first one is much easier to take, I suppose. That is, it's an imagining of a happy death, an imagining of perhaps the kind of death, aside from the fact that it's assisted suicide, um, but a happy death, the kind of death that perhaps many of us would want because it's filled with love. The second, the death scene from Magnolia, which is a pretty harrowing scene, one of, I believe, the great performances in film by the American actor Jason Robards, who was certainly at the end of his life when he did that scene. Not a happy death, um, not a happy situation. I think that if you look at the details of it's about a man who's in hospice care. He's at home, but his only companion is a nurse who is there with him, taking care of him. And if you look around, if you've been in that situation with somebody who's been ill, or especially with somebody who's dying, the hospital bed in the living room, the medicines and various medical things in the bedside table, pretty familiar and pretty well done. That's what it looks like, and that's what it feels like too, I think. But a man who, the central thing that he keeps saying is regret. That seems to be equally plausible way of depicting what a human being is thinking. A particular human being, maybe somebody who's led their life in a particular way, is thinking. So I think that the first two are clearly. I mean, I chose them to be contrasts or choices. It's clear. I mean, I'm not saying that both couldn't be true, in the sense that somebody could die this way and another person could die in a different way. That has to be the case. We don't all die in the same way. But when I ask which of these gets to the truth, I suppose, which of these, in your mind, these depictions reveals the truth about human life and death? Could be both of them do. I don't know. The final scene from All That Jazz, which is a late 70s American film by the great director Bob Fosse, a very autobiographical one, which he's essentially played by the other great Roy Scheider, the great actor from the 70s, Roy Scheider. A kind of a crazy, uh, outlandish, imagining of how a man copes with his own mortality, knowing that he's getting closer and closer to death, how he views, let's just say, the big number at the end of his life. Although you have to watch that to the very end. It's very important. I mean, it's basically a song and dance number. This man imagining how he's going out in his own mind, but you have to save the very last shot to really, get the intent of the director there, but a certain view of how we cope or how we imagine going out, sort of going out with a bang sort of idea. So yeah, I mean, there's no reading this week. It's all watching films, but watching films, watching scenes from films. First of all, as I hope I made clear by showing you that little clip from My Dinner with Andre, you can find philosophy in films. You can find philosophical ideas portrayed and explored in film. And you can find it everywhere, in art, in popular culture, in music, in all sorts of things. Poetry, obviously, I believe, having given you a couple of poems to read. But watching films is not just for pleasure. I mean, obviously, we enjoy watching film, but we can also analyze it. There's nothing wrong with that. Some films, all of these clips are meant to be philosophical, meant to be thought about, and it's not when you're watching, experiencing a work of art like a film. It's not just I liked it, I didn't like it. It's what did the thing say, and what do I think about what it said. So we can view these clips as texts in a way to be understood, interpreted, and explored.